Okay, hello. Welcome to Socially Unapologetic. Today we have my first episode here with Justin. Justin is an entrepreneur, speaker, and the host of the top-rated podcast, The Growth Now Movement. I am so excited to have Justin on here today. Hello, how are you?
Brooke, we're here. We've made it. I'm so honored to be your first guest, and I'm really excited to see where you take the conversation.
Yes. Okay. So I wanted to do something fun with my podcast. I wanted to start it off with 2 truths and 1 lie to get to know you. And I don't want you to tell people what the lie is because at the end, I want people to have the time to think about it while we're talking. And then at the end, I'm going to get you to tell the lie. So I want to start off 2 truths, 1 lie, anything that you can think of, like literally anything that nobody knows about you, they do know. Let's hear it.
Oh my gosh. Whoa, that's tough. So, okay, 2 truths and a lie. I broke both my hips.
Okay.
I met 3 presidents.
Yeah.
And I sang an all-state choir as a kid.
Okay, I love that. All right, we'll keep people guessing. They can think about it this entire podcast. I love that. But now that I kind of got like the fun part, I want to just like get people to kind of know you, hear what you're about, your journey. If you had to think of the whole entire journey of who you are, where you got to where you are, what is like one pinpoint that you could tell people?
Yeah, I mean, the people you surround yourself with is the key to success in everything that you do. Relationships are truly like rocket ships. If you surround yourself with the right people, success becomes so much easier, so much faster. Your relationships become healthier. I think early on in the entrepreneurial game, you try and put up a front that you're doing better than you really are because you don't want to come across as the newbie. You don't want to come across as the broke one trying to struggle to pay rent. You don't want to come across as that. And so it actually hurts you from forming relationships. So vulnerability right off the get, asking the right questions and making sure that you have the right people around you will change the game for you and fast forward your success exponentially.
Yeah, I love that. And then so to where you are in your entrepreneurship journey, how did it kind of start? What's like those main key points of that journey for you?
Yeah, I'll hit on a couple things. You know, I always jokingly say if there's a senior superlative in high school for least likely to succeed, it would have been me. I had a 1.7 GPA. My mom was in the middle of a 20-year battle with opioids, and my dad was in jail. And so when you look at that, there's no opportunity for success, right? Like actually statistics say if your parent's an addict, you have 50% chance of being an addict. And if your parent's in jail, you have 50% chance of ending up in jail. Like if you do the math, I'm 100% screwed. I've got no shot at this thing. And so at the age of 19, obviously not doing college other than a couple semesters of community college, I got a job in direct sales. And I ended up doing really, really well with the organization and working my way up into management. And that kind of gave me my first taste into entrepreneurship, like the idea of I want to make my own schedule. I want to set my own rules. I want to be my own boss. I want to dictate how much money I make. So that was kind of my first taste. But more importantly, within that organization, my mentor handed me a book. It was called Who Moved My Cheese? And it spoke to me at the core at that very moment. And the book is essentially about how things are going to change around you. You can't control that. But what you can control is how you react to that change. And this set me on a course of really self-discovery of, look, I was raised a certain way. Like, how do I define my own path? And I ended up getting into the corporate world and becoming successful in the corporate world of medical sales and medical sales management, which was great, but always had this desire to be an entrepreneur. And over the course from the age of 24 to 30, I had 3 failed businesses in different demographics and trying to serve in different ways, learned a lot of lessons and figured a lot out. And then at the age of 31, I launched a podcast, and that podcast became a catalyst for so much growth. That's when Inc. magazine listed me as a top 8 podcast every entrepreneur should follow. Opportunities presented itself. I was able to serve my community. And now a number of businesses have launched from there, from podcast companies to masterminds to live events to all those things. And obviously we can pick apart that all you want, but it was certainly a series of failures that taught me how to get to that success. And honestly, like if I had to say how it happened, it almost happened accidentally. Because back, 8.5 years ago, I would tell people I had a podcast and they would go, "What's a podcast?" Right? So it's a completely different world now where people now roll their eyes and they go, "Oh God, you have one too." And so for me, it's been quite a journey of discovery and failures and trying to figure it out and making small improvements along the way.
You know, what I like that you touched on is the failure part. We hear that word all the time. How did you deal with the failure? When you had those downs and you were at your worst of the business and things were failing, how did you deal with it? I know that there's not going to be one specific, like, this is how I dealt with it. But when you're so down bad and everything's going wrong, what was like that one thing that kind of shifted? I'm going to make better with this.
Yeah, your mindset's so important going into anything, especially starting a business. Like, how are you approaching it? What are your expectations? What do you consider a failure versus just a lesson and moving forward? All those things. And I go back to when I was 24 years old and I had a business where we did live events. And I say we because I had a business partner as well. And we started off pretty strong for the first 8 or 9 months, and we were growing, from event to event. And then we decided to take every penny that we made and put it into a big business event. We paid a speaker a lot of money to come speak at the event. It was like, this is going to be our catalyst for success. We thought it was everything. And we ended up selling 3 tickets to the event. And so we lost everything almost overnight. I remember thinking to myself, my 24-year-old self, you're a failure. You cannot be an entrepreneur. This isn't for you. You just don't have the right pieces. And at the time, my mom was still alive, and I called her and I said, hey, Mom, we're shutting down the business. And my mom said something, and she was just being a mom. But at the time, it was like, okay, cool, she's just being a mom. But later, I kind of was able to look back and really reflect on it. What my mom said to me was very simple. She said, you're moving in the right direction. Keep your head up and keep moving forward. When you think about that, if you're headed in the right direction, just because you had a misstep doesn't mean it's over, right? It just gives you a different path. It gives you a different opportunity, a different way to look at it. And so from then on, my failures were looked at as, okay, well, what can I do differently? What is my vehicle, right? Like I always say, like, what's your vehicle to success? Mine ended up being podcasting, but it could be social media. And I know that's something that you do and you help individuals with. It could be, YouTube. It could be whatever, right? And so it's just about trying new things and trying different avenues to do it. But for me, a failure is nothing but a lesson. So I like to fail fast and move forward fast. And that's really the approach that I take now. I really take the approach is like, why is this happening for me instead of to me, right? Get out of that victim mindset. And it took me a bit to get there and a bit to reflect. But failures will always continue. It's just part of the job. I had a very successful business heading into the pandemic. 75% of my income was public speaking and my live events. They all went away overnight and I lost 75% of my income. If it was Justin 10 years prior, I would have went and got a job. But it was, okay, well, what can I learn from this? And now I've been able to rebuild my business in a different way where I work 2 to 3 hours a day. I make more money than I've ever made in my life. And I love what I do every single day. And so everything's an opportunity. And that's kind of how I view failure as well.
No, I love that. I think even like you were saying, your business failed when COVID happened. For me, that's when my business excelled because everybody went online with social media, and I didn't even know that social media marketing management was like my career. I actually wanted to do event marketing and work in person, and then so that was taken away when COVID, and I just kind of was like, you know what, I'm throwing myself into it. And then I failed and things kept happening, and that was my full-time job. And I was like, how am I gonna pay for my rent? I love when you say it's a lesson, because I was like, okay, yes, this is a really terrible time, like shitty part in my life right now. Not everything's working out, but then I was kind of like on the up. Okay, but how can I learn from this? I'm not just going to give up. I've never in my entire life had that mindset of just give up and then find something else. So many times people are like, why don't you just get a marketing corporate job? You'll get paid a salary and your income's consistent and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, that's boring. Why do I want to live my life being boring? Not that anybody who does that, like, love that for you. That's just not for me. I'm such a creative person that, like, yeah, you have to step outside of that bubble and fail, because when you fail, I truly believe you become a better person and you learn from that and then you move forward and you can just keep growing as an individual.
One thing that I realize is like when you're in those moments of despair, right? When you're like, everything's falling apart, it feels like nothing's going my way. Like I have to go back to the old life that I hated and get a job if that's the case, or, it's different for everybody. But I realize in those moments, when you push through those moments, there's massive success on the other side of that. Like the universe is ready to reward you and you're being tested in that moment to say, hey, is this what you really want? Are you willing to go through this hardship in order to receive the gift that you're about to receive from all the hard work that you've just done? And I talk to entrepreneurs all the time when they're in that place. And I go, look, like you have 2 options right now. If you want to quit, you go right ahead. Like you can quit and take the easy way out. But I promise you, if you push through this moment right now and you do the things you're supposed to, you're going to be rewarded massively on the other end. So I'm so glad that you shared that part of your journey.
Yeah, and I think it's about not letting it define you. You hear people shy away from talking about the failure sometimes because it's embarrassing almost, and they're like, no, business is fine, business is good, we're on the up, but talk about those failures. Like, talk about it, because every single entrepreneur has those. When I first started, at least, like, I felt so ashamed. I was like, oh my God, I can't tell anybody I'm struggling. But now I'm just like, no, people need to know, because that's how people connect with you. That's how you build your business and your future and your authenticity as well, right? Like people respect that. They're not like, oh, okay, Justin's always posting about this that he's doing, this that he's doing, this that he's doing, and his life looks so perfect. And especially with social media, your life looks so perfect. But no, we all struggle, and like supporting each other with that rather than being a shoulder to them. Like, oh, okay, whatever. You're struggling. It's fine. Move on. Okay, so how did success look to you when you first started your journey as an entrepreneur? What was that like big vision of success?
Yeah, I think, like any 20-something-year-old, it was money, right? Like, go get the money, go get the house, go get the girl, go get those things that society says you should have, and then you'll be successful, and then therefore you can earn your happiness. Success to me now is doing what I want, when I want, with whom I want. Ultimate fulfillment 24/7 is my definition of success, right? And so how do you create that life for yourself? That's why I'm no longer in the rat race of working sun up to sundown and being a slave to my laptop. And if I go on vacation, I don't open my laptop sometimes for 7, 10, 15 days at a time, because I've designed my life that way. But it took me a long time to figure that out, right? So my mom ended up 6 months before I launched the show, my mom lost her 20-year battle to opioids. And it really kind of set me on a tailspin where I was blackout drunk 6 nights a week for 3 months straight. And when I finally came out of that bender where I was clearly just numbing a pain and running from grief, after I sat down and I felt that pain and went through that motion, I had 2 realizations. One was my mom didn't die because she was an addict. She died because she didn't love herself. And the second thing was I didn't love myself either. And so I went and then very quickly attained the things that I thought were going to make me love myself. The podcast took off. I started interviewing celebrities and entrepreneurs that I looked up to and admired, and New York Times bestsellers and all these things. Inc. magazine listed me as an entrepreneur to follow, and started speaking on stages and started making money. And it was like all these things, right? And I was told that like once I had those, I'd be happy. And I was more miserable than I was before. And I really had to begin to do that internal work. And that internal work led to, okay, doing what I want, when I want, with whom I want. It's not tied to a dollar amount. It's not tied to anything other than my freedom of time and choosing to have the right people around me, which goes to that first question that you asked me, right? Like making sure that you have those right people around you will lead to fulfillment and happiness, and making sure you fill your cup first. And I think for me, that was really the journey. It's interesting. Entrepreneurship happened for me quicker when I focused on me instead of the business. It happened for me quicker when I focused on my own health and wellness and all of that stuff than the ClickFunnels and the upsells and all the online courses and all that stuff. And so I think that for me has been the catalyst as far as how we can define success. I ask every single person on my show a 2-part question. The first part is, what's your definition of success? Second part is, what are 3 things you do every single day to ensure that success for yourself? And the one thing I realized about the definition of success, it is a moving target. It will evolve as you evolve. But where I am now with what I want, when I want, with whom I want, has been my definition of success for a very long time. And I'm sure it will be for a very long time going forward.
I love that answer. I think that's hitting the nail on the head. I think it's so important. When I first started my business, success was so different than it is 4 years later, right? I was money too. Like, okay, I'm going to work from home. Working from home is so luxurious. I get to go on vacations and I get to like do whatever I want. And yes, to a certain extent, because it is my life and my business, but at the same time, now I'm just so much more aligned, and everything I thought I knew then just shifted completely to what it is now. So I really like that. I wanted to kind of go back a bit to something that you said when you said you were interviewing the celebrity guests and stuff on your podcast. How many people have you interviewed? What was that number again?
So today I released episode 525, but there's solo episodes in there and all that fun stuff. So I'd say probably 480, something like that.
Okay. Out of the 480 people, the celebrities and everybody that you've kind of interviewed, what do you feel entrepreneurs' main message is? What's a similarity in all of their messaging?
Yeah, that's a really fascinating question, because I've interviewed people like comedian Bert Kreischer, and I've interviewed Ed Milet, who look at life so opposite of one another. As a matter of fact, Bert was on Ed Milet's podcast because of me. So that's a fun little connector there. And I'm like, how do I get on Ed's podcast? Like, what's going on here? When I look at that, it's so hard to see what it is. But honestly, if I were to really look at everybody across the board, including people like Bert, it would be to live your passion every single day. Like, they're truly passionate about what they do. Yes, there are things that they do just for money, but there's always a legacy piece. There's always a purpose in what they're doing. There's always a give back. There's always hey, I do this so I can do this, right? I often think about a friend of mine who's been on the podcast twice. His name's Fabio Viviani. He was on the show Top Chef. and he's got a massive business, $300 million a year, if not more now. He's opening, franchise chains of dessert restaurants and all these other crazy things, constantly growing. But what I realized is it provides him the ability to give at such a high level. And I love people who give at a high level. And I don't mean monetarily. I'm sure he does that too. But, of his time, of his resources, all these things, he's built something where he can genuinely be himself, which is a giver, somebody who wants to help others. And so I would say that would be the key, is to build something, even if the thing you're building that's making you money isn't truly your passion, utilize it to lean into your passion, because it makes it a lot easier to show up every single day. Like for me, I visualize where I want my future to be. I visualize the next big project that I'm doing, and I put myself in that scenario, and I feel it in every single sense that I have. And it makes it easier to make the moves that I have to do, right? Nobody wants to write the email sequence, but everybody wants the success that happens after the email sequence if it's in alignment with your purpose. Then it makes it a lot easier to sit down and write that sequence, or write that social media post, or write whatever. And I think for me, that's probably the commonality, just because they've come from so many different walks of life. Like I've interviewed 90s kid stars, and it's truly like the passion that they bring to the table, and they're living in it every single day. That's probably the common thread.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I just think it's the amount of people and people's direction of business and how entrepreneurs think, and something that I do for myself. And I'll ask you, at the beginning of the year, I'm not big on new year, new me, but in my business, I do a board and I write down all my goals. I'm just this is what I want to hit: small, medium, large, dream big ones, the small ones. And I write it out. And then I always go back to that when I feel unaligned with myself or my business, or I'm in a place where I'm just what do I even want to do? Am I going the right path with my business? Is this what I want? And I'll go back and I'll be no, this is my way. So for you, what's something that you kind of use to dream big, or what do you look back on when you're feeling unaligned?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have the daily visualization practice that keeps me in alignment with how I'm moving. That plus having the right coaches, the right masterminds, the right support. I think sometimes entrepreneurship can be super lonely. You feel like you're the only one struggling with it. You're the only one who understands oh, I had a $30,000 month, but I'm so stressed out and I'm so sad. Most people would be you had a $30,000 month. Yes. What are you talking about? Right?
Yeah.
And so if you're able to spend time with high level people to understand the idea that hey, I'm still continuing to want to grow. Yes, I'm still stressed out, even though I have this, this, and this. That's such a game changer to keep you in check. I have a mastermind, which some of your friends are in the mastermind. And it's really about that community of people that lift you up and go, whoa. I want to let you know that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Just simple things like that with people who are on the same path as you. So stop being alone and understand. I'm a big believer in, I don't do it, but I have some dear friends who are the masters of it, the vision boards and all that stuff. That's super powerful. There's so many different tools that you can use. But for me, the visualization practice has gotten so good that it plays like a movie in my head, where then I'm even dreaming it as well, which is crazy. And so that for me is the key. Surrounding yourself with the right people in the daily visualization practice keeps me on track to see what's next for me.
Yeah. I think it's funny how you said it's in your dreams. I think that's literally one of my main things is dreamer to CEO, because all you're consumed about when you're in business sometimes is what's in your dreams, and you're dreaming about it and you're thinking about it. So I like that you touched on that, because I thought that was a good connection. Justin, that was such a good conversation. I want to go back to the beginning where we talked about the 2 truths and 1 lie. If you want to go over those 3 that you said again, and then let us know the lie. Do you remember?
Let's see if I remember what I said. I met 3 presidents.
Yeah.
I broke both my hips, and I sang in an all-state choir when I was a kid. So my question for you is, which one do you think is the lie?
You said something about being just over your 30s. So the 2 hips, I'm but that's also not impossible.
I'm 40. I just turned 40.
Okay. I'm going to say the 3 presidents. I feel like it was 1 or 2.
It was the 3 presidents. I've met 0 presidents. I didn't know what to say. I was what lie do I say? That whatever. I actually broke both my hips by the time I was 14.
What? So okay, you have to tell that story.
I was born with a growth plate deficiency in my hips. And so the first one, I was 12 and I was skateboarding and it shattered into 5 pieces. And then my second hip, I stood up out of a chair and turned around and it fell out of the socket. So ended up having 5 surgeries over the course of 4 years. It was a pretty wild early teenage years for me as far
Yeah.
as, totally disrupting my social life in so many ways. Like I was a big baseball player and all that stuff, and that all got taken away.
No.
But there's actually something I don't really talk about anymore because it doesn't really
Yeah.
affect me in any way, shape, or form. So that was fun. It allowed me to talk about it there for a minute.
And then the last one was the singing one.
Oh,
Choir?
yeah. I was in all-state choir as a kid.
Nice. I love that. All right. Well, Justin, thank you so much for being the first guest on Socially Unapologetic. I had such a fun time with you, and hopefully we will see you again.
Brooke, thank you so much.